Hey, thank you once again for tuning in to Inner Space TV. I'm your host, Tom Reed, with my coworker, partner, Matt Moniz. And tonight we have a very special guest, Tracy Torm'e. He is a screenwriter and television producer known for his work on Sliders, Star Trek The Next Generation, Fire in the Sky, Saturday Night Live, and I Am Legend. Ladies and gentlemen, Tracy Torm'e. Hey, Tracy.
Hey everybody, nice to be with you guys.
Good to
Thanks for the
have you.
nice introduction. Thank you.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So I've been waiting weeks. I guess we've been going back and forth to get you on the show, and there's so many things that we could talk about. So maybe we could just, I guess, start with some of the rumors and talk right now about, the UFO phenomenon, what's happening with disclosure. I think you have a couple of things you'd like to share. What's going on in your mind? What do you think's going on?
Well, it's a really exciting time in the UFO field these days. We're actually getting some disclosure, something that I sort of doubted was going to ever happen. And it also reminds me of my old friend Alan Hynek, who I got to know pretty well in the latter part of his life. And I remember Alan at one point being so frustrated with trying to get the scientific world to take UFOs seriously. And he sort of wistfully said to me, what we really need is a whistleblower. And I'm just afraid that's not going to happen in my lifetime. And he was right, because Alan died of a brain hemorrhage very suddenly, many years ago now. And I really believe that Lou Elizondo was the whistleblower that he always hoped would come along. So to see this happening now, where people are finally starting to take it a bit seriously in the real world, it's nice to see that happening. I was also not sure that it ever would,
Hmm.
but it's an exciting time. Yeah.
Well, I think you're right. I mean, he's brought a lot to the forefront.
Hmm. And it's interesting when you look at it right now. Again, this is something that I happen to know because of my friendship with Lou now. It's interesting. The Navy has suddenly become totally transparent about all this stuff. But on the other hand, the Air Force is still dragging its feet and trying to act like there's nothing going on. And once Lou came forward with all this stuff, he started getting attacked from
Did he?
all kinds of different places. They started questioning his military background. I mean, the guy was running Guantanamo Bay for quite a while, and he was well known in the Pentagon. And that's why Harry Reid actually chose him to be this so-called whistleblower. But they've started really coming after him now that he's making progress, and it's
Oh,
just a shame that. Sorry,
no. So who's coming after him? Is it like the media,
you
the
didn't hear that.
news?
All of the above.
Department of Defense, DoD,
Department
Department
of
of
Defense?
Defense.
Huh.
Yeah, and it started with some rumors about him that weren't true, and then they started saying, "Well, yeah, he's got a good military background, but it's not all that good. It doesn't really mean that much." So once he decided to try to take on the powers that be on this, they started getting a bit nervous, and they're doing what they can to slow things down. But fortunately, Lou went to college at University of Miami with
Okay.
Marco Rubio.
Okay.
So he was able to go straight to Marco Rubio and show him some of the stuff that he has now that is eye opening. And Marco Rubio, to his credit, helped to lead the Congress into mandating that a lot of this secretive material must come out now. And there's a timetable on it. I think every 90 days, they've got to release something very significant that's new. And I think they had a 180 days originally to do the original release, which was called the Unclassified Report. And it's all the most unspectacular stuff that they could put out. And they did it again. They waited until the right day of the week when it would get the least notice by the press. And now it didn't make a huge splash because it was unclassified. But I'm told the classified report is coming out pretty soon. And that's going to have some real, jaw-dropping stuff in it.
And this is through Marco Rubio, and with regard to information that Lewis has right now that he's just waiting to have released, or is this stuff that we're still unpacking?
Well, they had to put out a mandate of a timetable for in which time they had to release a certain amount of stuff.
Right.
They've intentionally released the least spectacular stuff, but there's more stuff coming. And it's at the point where I honestly believe that in the next 5 years or so, and that's my timetables, it's not necessarily accurate at all, but within about 5 years, the world as a whole will have to absolutely acknowledge that we are being surveilled by an unknown force that's been doing this all the way back to the 40s and maybe back to biblical times, as some people believe.
Yeah,
but
sure.
for at least since 1947, someone is monitoring us and surveilling us. And then, in my opinion, Tom, the most amazing part of the whole story is that if you come down to asking them, well, who is it? Who's coming here? Why are they coming here? Where are they from? What do they want? After 70 years of studying it, they still don't know.
Yeah.
And I started
how
saying that. I started saying that at UFO conventions when once in a while I would agree to speak at one. And I started telling them something about 20 years ago that got a lot of people mad at me, actually. But I said, guys, there is no gigantic conspiracy. There is no, massive government cover up. The truth is they don't even know exactly what they're dealing with still. And people just thought that was crazy for me to say that was just, for real true believers in the UFO world. I was like a heretic for saying that. It really upset them. And one day I said that to Lou. I said, Lou, that's what I came to believe. And Lou said one word, bingo. So
Sure.
the first thing Lou and his people went out to find out was, could these things be Chinese? Could they be Russian? Could they be American secret weapons? And after a while, Lou's people were convinced that it's none of the above. It's something else.
No, how could you actually really know? How can you there's more than one race out there. There's more than one reason for being here, whether it's mining, who knows. But to suggest that we actually know, I think would be ignorant. So I'm with you.
The other thing everybody's overlooking here is the fact that they're actually saying something. After so many years of denial, we have no more, we have no more. Now that they actually are saying that there are things, okay, that in and of itself is extremely significant, especially to, all of the people that have sent requests and no, we have nothing, we have nothing, we have nothing. Now we have a validation to say, yeah, you did. And so any other thing you say, we got to take as suspect.
Absolutely. And I think it's fascinating to look at the way the press is dealing with Elizondo and his people. They're certainly being more open than they used to be. But anytime you see a report about the UFO situation now, they've got to make the obligatory comment about little green men and smile at each other before they get off the air.
Yeah, the snide.
Yeah.
Yeah. The rolling of the eyes. The rolling of the eyes. Yeah.
Yeah. So
you're probably aware. You're probably aware our case went to the United Nations. and that my father was a
think you told
politician,
me
and it got mentioned at in front and
that.
support of GA 33426, and our case got inducted by state. But again, the angle here was the connection to the space race and what could it have been. Not that we didn't see something, but of course, it's always there's a direction. They want to spin it this way or spin it that way, and I was okay with what they did because, like you said earlier, who can really say exactly what we saw, what were you part of? But at the same time, it was there was a conviction there, even back in 2015, to say yes, there is something happening. So I was proud to be part of that as well. But again, there was always
Absolutely.
this.
I can also tell you guys that Elizondo is really very dutifully making sure to involve all the international people in this too. He's not just going through the U.S. Congress. He's made incredible headway with Italy and Japan and many other countries where they've admitted, finally, they've felt free to admit that they've always been interested in this too, and that they've all had some pretty spectacular cases that we would maybe have never have heard of again if it wasn't for Lou and what he's doing. But the international people are now really supporting full disclosure. So he's made a lot of headway. He really has.
Well,
Yeah.
it is an international phenomenon. It is global, quite literally. So yeah, I think that's where you're going to see the biggest amount of change once everybody gets on the same page. And then I think you may say you may see actual, I'll call it usable information and cooperation occur.
So if I can jump in here. So what was his position exactly? I've heard a couple of different things about what he did for the government and where his role. Do you know exactly what his title was?
Well, my understanding of the beginnings of Lou getting involved was it all came from Harry Reid, the senator from Nevada that died recently.
Okay.
He'd known him at the Pentagon and knew him to be a straight shooter and a patriot. And he was handpicked by Harry Reid to help to release all of this stuff. And Lou, from what I know, Lou is Cuban American, and he also was the head of all security at Guantanamo Bay, and he ran that for a while. And he got under the skin of the jihadists so much that he was put on the top of their hit list, and so he really made his mark there. And so that's one thing I knew he did. And the thing I've learned about knowing Lou is he's just a very likable guy. And again, like I said, a total straight shooter. And, it's interesting that when he first started to get into this, he was not a believer in this stuff. In fact, I think he was really surprised by all the evidence. And then he legitimately became alarmed by the fact that there's something that can be flying around the United States when it wants to, and that there's nothing we can do to stop it. There's obviously a technology here that's way beyond us, at least currently. So I think the real reason that he started to dive into this the way that he did was he felt there was a security threat here. That there's, and we've talked before also about the Air Force's attitude. I think the Air Force is one of the reasons they maintain their stubborn attitude about this is that they don't really want to admit that they're not in control of our skies, that they basically have no control of our skies when one of these incidents happens. And I think the Air Force is kind of embarrassed by that. And that's part of the reason they drag their heels.
They don't want to look, less powerful.
Impotent, yes, exactly.
Yeah.
And But I again, as I've gotten to know Lou better, he is a very deeply patriotic guy, and he's very loyal to the United States. And he feels like if there's something flying around that could be a threat, we need to know about it. And I think that was his main motivation, believe it or not. I really think that was.
So was he still employed when he released this stuff, or was this, did he like leave like his 2 week notice and then decide to do this after he left? Or I'm sure there were agreements in place that would have prevented him from saying too much while he was in office.
And did he regret having done it?
Yeah, well, Harry Reid came up with $22 million in secret to fund this new research organization, which I think it's called ATIP, and aerial threat. It's some acronym. I don't really remember exactly, but
APV or something.
ATIP started looking. ATIP started looking into it, and that was the whole start of this. Is that they spent the $22 million to start looking into it, and they found out. Guess what? There is something to this, which a lot of people still don't think there is. But again, I think those people are going to be silenced within a few years because there's going to be no doubt this is real.
Yeah, of course.
Or a little sooner.
Yeah.
Or hopefully sooner. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you're talking about your timetable and things like that. What about their timetable? Because if you think about it, we're not the ones in control.
Well, I think that they basically have an attitude of not having a timetable other than the mandates from Congress. That's obviously a ticking clock. But in general, how long it's going to take for this to be fully revealed or to come to any conclusions, they've stayed really agnostic about that, from what I know.
I was actually referring to the people that they were looking at. Our timetables and human timetables are one thing. Whatever this phenomenon is, it's going to act on its own. So
yes, that's very true. That's very true. There's no way to speed it up or slow it.
Right. So, hey, Tracy. So, being like in the know, is there something coming out that you might be aware of that maybe you can't share or have an inkling of, or do you think there's anything very powerful or profound coming out anytime soon?
Well, I think the reveal of the international agreements that have gone on sort of behind the scenes recently, that'll be coming out. And I also think that unclassified report. The classified report.
Right. Well,
that's
General
coming out. That's
General Assembly 33-426 was originally introduced in 1974, and that was the idea of all our countries sharing our information about this topic, together. And then it was revisited in 1992.
Was that the Grenada thing that went on?
No, this was GA 33-426 was exactly what our case went in support of back in 1992. So I'm wondering if they're revisiting that again, because that, Robert Blechman, I don't know if you know who Robert Blechman was, but he was an attorney who was he was our family's attorney back in the 80s. He was a colleague of my father's, and he was the one who headed up the meeting at the symposium, which I think was with Mohammed Rabin at the time, was the president of the Parapsychology Society. So I'm wondering if that's coming back into play, if that's coming full circle once again.
I don't know about it, but it could very well be.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, it was kind of this open format for all our countries to kind of group together and share what we know about this phenomenon as a whole and kind of work together on it. But
yeah,
who knows?
I know Lou's been associating with the United Nations on several things recently too about this. And it's interesting to find out that so many other countries don't hold the secret of the UFO situation the way we do in the U.S. And it's a shame because the U.S., leads the way usually in individualism and, freedom and things like that. But when it comes comes to UFOs,
Yeah.
the United States has shut it down as much as they possibly can, and it's just unfortunate. But those days are changing. So,
Yeah. Well, with all the all the private, space ventures with SpaceX, Elon Musk, or whoever, Bigelow, if NASA doesn't do something to say, look, we're going to release a little something or work with you on, well, then again, NASA's backed by the U.S. government, so they can only say what they're allowed to say. But now it seems to be this race to who's going to be able to divulge this or release this stuff first.
That's true.
So,
yes.
Yeah. So. So anyway, on the lighter side of things, if you can switch gears here for a minute, or do you want to say anything else?
No,
or
fine.
Yeah,
absolutely.
So one of the reasons I wanted you on the show was that everybody knows you from Fire in the Sky, and I was like, I was looking at your IMDb, did a little research on you, like, my God, this guy has done so much, and I think it's a shame that that people don't know more about you as a person, and when I saw that you wrote for Saturday Night Live, I was like, oh my God, I was addicted to Saturday Night Live in the early 80s. And you worked with Chevy Chase and Bill Murray. And I think it was Bill Murray. Maybe it was Eddie Murphy, I think. And
Eddie Murphy, yeah.
Yeah.
I was a little too young for those other guys. But Eddie Murphy was.
Yeah.
And it's funny because
there's a delay. I'm sorry. Go ahead. There's a delay. Yeah, there's a delay in here. Problem. Go ahead, sir.
No, I was just going to say that when I got to Saturday Night Live, people there already felt that the show had already been on the air 4 or 5 years too long. And that was now like, 20, 30 years ago. And it's still going, which is kind of interesting. Although it's interesting also to see how the political world works, because in my opinion, there would be so much endless material to lampoon Biden about, and they won't really touch it because he's on the wrong side of the politics, so they leave him alone. And I just thought the other day, God, I could have a field day if they'd let me turn me loose on Biden if I was still at Saturday Night Live. But again, it's not the right politics, I guess.
Yeah.
But
yeah, I get it.
Wait a minute. Isn't that politics itself?
Of course it is.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. What was that old saying? You know who rules you by those you can't criticize?
Well, that's a good one. I never heard that before.
That's a maxim that goes back hundreds of years.
Yeah. I want to use that in a sentence later. Hey, so one more thing. So if you don't mind, I Am Legend. Sure. I love that movie. And you worked on I Am Legend, correct? You co-produced that?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, you know what? I wrote the original script for it and got it launched. And my wife had told me you liked that film and were interested in it. That beautiful German Shepherd dog was actually 3 dogs that were identical looking, and we traded them off throughout the movie, depending on the scene. No one really knew that, but yeah, it was like triplets almost, as I recall. Did you want to talk about I Am Legend?
Yeah, sure. Yeah. It's a good film, and I'd love to talk about it. I actually worked on a movie with Will Smith too, Boys 2.
Yeah.
So I was contacted by a longtime Hollywood producer named Arnold Kopelson, and he was interested in doing a remake, or not so much a remake, but a film adaptation of The Fugitive.
Yeah.
So they contacted me, the old TV series with David Jansen. So I started working with them on a remake of The Fugitive, and we came up with a lot of cool stuff. And then when it was finally time to start the script officially, I got this call from Kopelson's people saying, well, Tracy, there's a little bit of a difficult situation here. We want you to be the screenwriter of the film, but there's sort of a flavor of the month guy in Hollywood. He's got a film coming out called Hook with Dustin Hoffman, I think. And they said he's sort of like the golden boy with Warner Brothers Studios. So we want you and they want him, and we're going to see how it turns out. So I don't know, like a week later, they called me back and said, well, they're going to go with the flavor of the month. And we feel really bad about it because you gave us a lot of good ideas for the film, some of which we'd like to use. So we want to make it up to you. Is there any property that Warner Brothers owns that you'd like to get involved with making a film? And I said, well, my favorite book of all time is this book called I Am Legend by Richard Matheson, who wrote all the best Twilight Zones and many other really cool things. And I said, I know Warner Brothers owns it because they remade it as the Omega Man, which was nowhere near the book at all. It strayed a long way. And actually, the Omega Man was the second adaptation of the book I Am Legend. The first had been a movie called The Last Man on Earth with Vincent Price. That was actually the first version. And I said, guys, this would make such a great movie. And what's great is it's been done wrong twice. Let's do it right the third way. So they were very cool. They said, great. And then about a few days later, I get a call and saying, well, Warner Brothers said these two other producers came in just last week and they want to do this. And we feel now it wouldn't be fair to cut them out of it. So we want to put Tracy together with these two guys and see what you guys come up with. So I met these two guys named Moritz and Heyman. David Heyman actually later made all the Harry Potter movies down the road. But I met with the two of them and found out they had no idea that I Am Legend was a great book. They had just gone into the studio and said, we want to remake the Omega Man. So I had to go meet with these guys and say, guys, the book is 100 times better than the Omega Man. Read the book and then let's talk. So they finally read the book. It took a long time to get them to, by the way. But they finally read it. And we all agreed, yes, the book, the I Am Legend, is much better. So we're going to remake it and do it the right way. Now, the interesting thing was that the book I Am Legend, the original, is the ultimate vampire story. All of the creatures of the night in the book were vampires. And it's like a plague had swept the earth, and all these vampires had come out of the closet, basically, because they'd always been around when most people thought they were a legend, and that was their strength. So they appeared, and that's what the book is really about. So I got to meet Richard Matheson and told him, we're going to make the I Am Legend, and we're finally going to do it right. It's going to be very loyal to your book, and I'm excited to do that. So do we still have time for me to finish this story? Are we okay?
Yeah, we got a little bit of time. Sure.
Yeah, we got time.
Okay. So we go in for the big meeting at Warner Brothers Studios to tell them, hey, we love I Am Legend. We really want to make it, blah, blah, blah. And in the middle of the meeting, we got this weird feeling that something was passing between the studio executives at Warner Brothers that we weren't completely aware of. And finally, they said to us, well, guys, we can never make this movie. We're sorry, we can never make it. We looked at each other in the room and thought, what's that all about? And they said, because it has the V word in it. So we are not going to make it. We all looked at each other. What's the V word? And we asked them, and they said, vampires. We were never going to make another vampire movie here at this studio. because we made this movie a few years ago called Love at First Bite. And it was supposed to be a big blockbuster for us, but it lost a lot of money. So we've all made a vow we will never do another V word movie at all. So we're all like totally devastated in the room because we figured, well, that ends that. And then we kept talking to them. They finally decided they wanted me to go and work with a bunch of experts on pandemics and see if I could come up with something other than vampires to make the creatures. So I did spend 2 weeks with a lot of pandemic experts, learned enough to keep me up at night for a long time because the stories about these pandemics were really horrifying. I mean, they talked a lot about smallpox, Ebola, and the bird flu. And they explained to me that every 80 years or so, a new pandemic sweeps the world, and it's nature's way of culling the herd, thinning out the population. So after working with these guys for a couple of weeks, I came back in and said, well, let's just not call them vampires. Let's not have them sucking blood and stuff like that. But let's do it this way. So they finally greenlit the project and said, okay, go ahead. So I started writing the first script for the movie, and I was about halfway through when suddenly Fox Network renews Sliders for a second season, which no one had thought was going to happen. And I'm now being pressured big time to come up with the new pilot for not the pilot, but the kickoff to the second season of Sliders. So I went to Heyman and Moritz, those two producers I told you about, said, guys, I've got to put the script away for a little while because I've got to deal with Sliders in a hurry. But don't worry, I'll get back and finish the script as soon as I can. Well, to make a hideously long story short, those two guys started pressuring me like crazy. And they were saying nonsensical things to me like, just tell the Sliders people you can't do it right now and finish our script. I said, guys, it doesn't work that way. I've got other responsibilities, but I'll get back to I Am Legend soon. I promise. Just give me a little bit of time. Well, these guys just kept, haranguing me again and again and again to speed up the script, which was half written at this point, and took place in Los Angeles, by the way, not New York, as it is in the current movie. And finally, one day, I was so perturbed by this, I said, guys, if you're this impatient, get another writer. Just go get somebody else. And I figured they would never do that because I had started this project. But I read in the trades a few days later that they replaced me with these other writers. So I was so ticked off. At the time, I had an office at Universal Studios. I remember picking up my script, half completed, and throwing it in the trash can there. And that begins an 11-year odyssey to get the other script made. And Arnold Schwarzenegger was attached at one time. Michael Douglas was attached. Ridley Scott was attached. It went through all this stuff, but 11 years go by, and finally, Will Smith says he wants to do it, and immediately it's greenlit. So the film is now being made, and I'm feeling on one hand, I'm proud because I started this whole thing, but on the other hand, I'm not feeling very attached to it because I didn't end up writing it. But there were things like the dog that came totally from me and other things in it that were definitely mine. But one day I just get a call from the Writers Guild and they say, Tracy, we're prepared to give you half a writing credit on I Am Legend. All you need to do is show us the completed script you turned in. And I thought, well, that's going to be kind of tough. It's in a trash can at Universal Studios for about the last 10 years. So it ended up that I did get a producing credit on it, but I didn't get the writing credit on it for obvious reasons. Probably cost myself several $100,000s by that moment of, temper when I threw the script away. And that's what ended up happening. And it was, it was hard to even tell people this story because I was really kicking myself for what I had done. But I still feel very attached to the project. And if anyone out there has not read the book, the original book is really great, better than any of the movies. So there you go.
Wow. I'm sorry that happened to you. How? Let me ask you this
Pretty
then. How
amazing.
did? Yeah, it's unique. Unfortunate too, but it was a good movie. Did well. How did you
Thank
get
you.
involved in Fire in the Sky? I mean, how did that fall in your lap? If you don't mind me asking.
I used to own a book called Missing Time by Bud
Okay,
Hopkins,
sure.
Know
and
him well.
I spent 3 years pitching it in Hollywood. So I met Travis and bought the rights to Travis's book, and then that took another 6 years, but finally got made. So that's really how it came about, and I became friends with Travis and watched him go through an amazing transformation where he was so gun shy and damaged when I first met him because of what the press and others had done to him. And then nowadays, he's like a totally different person. I mean, he's just completely come out of his shell, and it's been a pleasure to get to know him and to tell that story. So,
Like you said, I think within the next few years, I mean, it's going to be quite telling, and I think that at that point, even with our case, I mean, the government was like, yeah, what you saw was off world. Then your question is, well, who's operating it? How is it a drone? Is there someone in it? So then every time you get to one point, now you have to, there's all these other steps and all these answers and unanswered questions that you have, and it just goes down this road, and I guess it's just too much for people, So you're better off just keeping it simple, keeping to what you can prove, and not jumping in with 2 feet, maybe one, if that makes sense.
one of the things that yeah. One of the things that I remember most was when I would be driving back to Saturday Night Live in a cab, having just been with Bud for the previous 2 hours, whatever. I would look around and I'd go, this stuff can't be real. I mean, here I am in the middle of Manhattan, going back to 30 Rock or whatever, and all that's in my head are these strange, and personal abduction stories that I've just witnessed with lots of emotion, lots of fear, other things like that. And I would say to myself, no, this can't be real. It's got to be some other explanation for it. But then, the more that I would see through Bud, the more I would say, of course it's real. Something is really going on here.
Yeah.
John Mack always thought they're here to cure pollution and save us from wrecking the earth and all that. And because of that, he could see the darkest stories and put a positive spin to it. And that was, I admired that, to be honest with you. But my take on it was much darker. I mean, I really saw it as, I don't like the fact that human beings aren't asked their permission, that it just takes place. And so I think my abduction stories always tended to be a bit darker. And then we explored it in the miniseries Intruders for CBS, where we got into the hybrids and all that. Yeah, Debbie Jordan, I think, right?
Well,
And
yeah.
that's, I guess, her pseudonym.
Yeah.
But it could end up being, ironically, that abductions are the key to understanding the whole phenomenon when all is said and done. It could be what it's really all about. Who knows where it's all going to end up when all is said and done?
Did you ever meet Linda Corteil?
No, I don't think so.
No, the 12th floor incident in New York City. I know she was
Oh,
working with Bud Hop.
Yeah. Witnessed is the
Yeah,
book.
I didn't
that's
recognize the
about-
name. Right. I know all about the book. Bud, when I was, very close when he was working on that book.
I'm in it.
And okay. And doesn't it involve the mystery figure from the United Nations too that gets very involved in it? So I remember that's what Bud was promoting when when he was working on that book.
The diplomat.
Mm-hmm.
The Cuellar. Why don't you
Yeah.
say his name?
Yeah. I never met her.
Have you ever talked to Dan Aykroyd being involved with Saturday Night Live? He's had some.
Yes.
Yeah.
Dan is like a big time believer. He believes everything comes down the pike. It's kind of like Linda Howe. I mean, it's just like never heard a story he didn't believe. So he gets a little bit ungrounded from time to time, but he's legitimately somebody that was fascinated by the subject, and he was a big fan of Fire in the Sky. I've heard stories that people would come to his house and he would get out a print of it and run it for people. But yeah, I knew Dan. Very nice guy, very funny guy. There you go.
Yeah, a lot of people like that movie. I think a lot of people liked it because it wasn't too sci-fi. It was very grounded by the way it was put together. It had a lot of heart. It had a lot of family relationships, and it really showed the
Thank you.
how I guess how anything, regardless of the topic, can really destroy a family, and how it can destroy a community, and at the same time bring people together. So it was it was a good film. It really was. I've seen it a dozen times. Matter of fact, Travis watched some of it, I think, on that sofa behind me. Yeah. So.
Oh wow.
Anyway,
You pretty much covered very well. They covered very well the we'll call it the crucifixion of them, in the way that they were, dealt with. They were ready to lynch him for a murder that didn't actually happen.
I always thought that was the most interesting part of the story, and I think because I'd done so many other UFO related things, I was not eager to turn it into a UFO movie. I mean, I really wanted to explore the
Human
ironies of these the two best friends that have this thing happen, and it just changes their lives. And I also thought it was really interesting that the guy that drove off and left him in the woods
Mike
was
Rogers.
his best friend, his future brother-in-law, and the way that Travis felt of learning that his best friend had driven off, and that probably none of this would have happened if he had. Yeah, it's an amazing case, but I also thought, the guy went somewhere for 5 days.
Yeah.
And where he woke up, it was a much larger place than the ship that zapped him. So he was taken, obviously, somewhere else. And as I told Travis one day, Travis, have you considered that they may have killed you and then brought you back to life with certain of their science? And he said that has occurred to him, and it really disturbed him at first. But he's so he's so easy within his own skin now than he used to be. He's just comfortable with what happened to him, and he's not worrying about whether people believe him or not.
Yeah.
So I think he's made real strides. Yeah.
Yeah, he's a good friend, and he's a strong individual in a lot of ways, and
Absolutely.
I value his friendship. I think we're up, right?
Mhm.
Is it? Yeah. Okay. Hey, Tracy, thank you so much for
Thank
making
you.
time, and I hope to have you on again, and you have my number
Thank you.
anytime. All right. Thanks, guys.
Thank you for having
Thank you
me,
so
guys.
much.
Thank you.
Thank
Absolutely.
you.
Good night. Night.
Good night.